Hi. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our presentation. As Sean said, every voice can be heard using diversity, equity, and inclusion collections in an academic library. My name is Rebecca Hunnicutt, and I'm the Collections Management Librarian from Georgia Southern University. And I'm presenting today with my colleagues, Kay Coates, Research Services Librarian, Nathan Banks, Cataloging Library Technical Assistant, and Payton Smith, Acquisitions Assistant. Our topic today covers the 3 diversity, equity, and inclusion bibliographic collections that the Georgia Southern Libraries utilize in our collection development process of diverse materials. So these collections were created with the help of the University Libraries Diversity Council, the ULDC, which is co-chaired by Kay Coates and supported by Payton Smith as a council member. The ULDC and the cataloging team, which myself and Nathan are members of, work together in developing these collections and making the materials available to our patrons. In this presentation, we will specifically talk about the need for DEI collections in our library, the ULDC and their participation in collection development, the cataloging of DEI materials, and finally, the evolution of DEI collections. So as societal understanding grows around DEI topics, so should the availability of information in community service areas like libraries. There are many reasons for libraries to develop DEI collections, but here are just 3 of them that we found important. First, understanding. Understanding another person's perspective helps in understanding that person, but it also helps you to learn how to regularly look at things from a different perspective. Just like learning a dance routine and repeating it over and over, eventually the routine will become muscle memory. So if one continually practices looking at things from another's perspective, it will become muscle memory to think about things from different viewpoints, allowing one to become more understanding, or at least that's the hope. Second is representation. Feeling represented or seen in a place that should be a safe space for everyone can help people feel like they belong. This sense of belonging can keep individuals and communities from feeling isolated. No person or group wants to feel alone or on the outskirts of society. We all want to feel like we belong. And as a library, we are oftentimes a hub for the community or the central location of an academic institution, and therefore a leader in community support. As such, we need to represent all members of the community. Finally, personal growth. Learning to understand groups or individuals can broaden one's worldview, which in turn will broaden themselves. Being open to different ideas, customs, etc., opens a person to whole new worlds that they haven't experienced before. It sounds a little utopian, but it's accurate. The more we allow differences, the more we can learn about the different ways to live this life. Okay, so out of utopia and back into the library. Here at Henderson Library, we have created 3 different bibliographic collections. We've got diversity and inclusion, leadership and inclusive excellence, and diverse perspectives. As you can see, the number associated with each collection is the number of titles we hold for that collection. The D&I collection has the most titles because it holds the broadest definition. This broad coverage collection focuses on all aspects of human differences, social identities and social group differences, issues, ideas, practices, and policies related to identifying and addressing structural inequalities, which advantage some populations and disadvantage others, and focused and sustained efforts to increase mutual respect, opportunities for achievement, and sense of belonging in our communities. Diverse Perspectives holds the 2nd largest collection because it is for materials authored by a member or members of historically underrepresented groups or by an underrepresented minority group about that group. These diverse authors share unique, multiform perspectives drawn from or inspired by their own experiences. So this collection has the ability to be large as well because there are so many voices to be heard. Finally, leadership and inclusive excellence. With 8 titles, this is a small collection at the moment. Because the subject matter is very specific and is really only going to grab hold of individuals that are interested in leadership in higher education and professional settings. This collection focuses on sources that help university leaders at all levels gain a greater understanding and awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusivity issues at the workplace that, when appropriately managed, could provide additional opportunities, engagement, advancement, creativity, and innovation for persons from diverse backgrounds. Having this collection clearly fits with the mission of an academic library and university, so it is one that we need to develop more. And so these are just a few examples of some of the materials in each of these collections. As you can see, there is a clear difference in titles between the leadership collection and the other two. The titles in Diverse Perspectives and Diversity and Inclusion at a Glance look like they could be in either collection, but we'll discuss in a few minutes how we determine where each item goes. Now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Kay, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the ULDC.
Thank you, Rebecca. When the ULDC, which stands for University Libraries Diversity Council, were given the task of collaborating with colleagues to decide the names and the descriptions for the three collections Rebecca just spoke about, we decided that, of course, in true library profession fashion, we're gonna resort to looking at the Library Bill of Rights, which states that collection development should reflect the philosophy inherent in Article 1 that states books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. A diverse collection should contain content by and about a wide array of people and cultures to authentically reflect a variety of ideas, information, stories, and experiences. Now, you might ask me how we came by those titles. If you look at the infographic, you will see at the center the theme that says institution. In case anyone is wondering, institution is there because Georgia Southern University rests on 5 strategic pillars. Pillar 1 is student success. Pillar 2 is teaching and research. Pillar 3, in the center, is inclusive excellence. Pillar 4 is operational efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. And pillar 5 is community engagement. So when the council got together to craft definitions, we focused on these 5 pillars for substance, in addition for guidance. Essentially because the core values of the university are pivotal and operationally actualized, implicitly and explicitly through these 5 prongs of institutional foundation. So you can ask me, so what are the core values of the institution? As a library professional and information provider, I'm happy to provide an answer which can be found on the library's website. This is what it says. It says that faculty, staff, and students embrace core values of collaboration, academic excellence, discovery and innovation, integrity, openness and inclusion, and sustainability. As such, the members of the ULDC deliberated on the 6 principal elements highlighted here in the infographic. So we looked at perspective. We took the perspective of borrowing on and standing on pillar 3, inclusive excellence, which celebrates diversity and all the different viewpoints that fall under that theme. We wanted to take an innovative approach, and so that is why we created distinctively recognizable collections with the concurrent descriptions. We wanted also to solve a problem even though it might not be perceived as a problem, which it is, usually it's latent. It's not as manifest as we think it is. So we wanted to encourage visible collection and collection building that included voices that are overlooked, missed, or totally ignored. We highlight engagement because we wanted to honor every aspect of humanity, regardless of religion, race, sexual orientation. We just wanted a collection that when people choose to browse or use the resources, which included books and other media, we wanted them to feel that there was a sense of belonging and that there were a place within the library holdings that provided those resources. We took a creative approach, consciously situating resources designed for identity as well. And in terms of experience, we wanted to promote equity of representation in our collective holdings. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Nathan.
All right, so on to the cataloging process. So the process of adding materials to our DEI collections begins the same way as any other process of cataloging does, which is finding out information about the work. First, we assess the information about the title, and to do this, we're going to look primarily at the summary and the author biographies for our DEI collections. However, other sources of information like the table of contents are also usually relevant. What we're doing when we do this, we're looking for terms or phrases which indicate that an item might be relevant to our DEI guidelines. If a work looks like it may fit into our DEI collection, then we take a closer look at it and compare it to our collection guidelines. To determine this, we ask several questions. First, is the work relevant to the criteria? We look at whether or not the work has relevant information about things such as race, gender, sexuality, religion, or neurodivergence. And is the work about identifying or addressing structural inequalities or highlighting other aspects of the lived experience of these communities? Next, we ask, is the work primarily about DEI subject matter? Although a work may mention subjects relating to DEI subject matter or groups, that does not mean it is fit for these collections. We want the works within these collections to be limited to those which are primarily about the DEI subject matter that we've identified. That means that items which only contain individual chapters or essays regarding DEI subject matter will be excluded from the collection, even though they contain information which might pertain to the spirit of the collection. Next, we look at, does the work show a diverse perspective? So works by authors who are members of minority or historically oppressed groups can often touch on topics relevant to our DEI initiatives. They can contain invaluable insights about the lived experience of these groups, even if they aren't entirely about diversity initiatives or specifically about advancing rights or things of that nature. Once we've asked those questions, we have to come to our last question, which is, do all the standards need to be met exactly? Even with the prior questions, there can be questions about whether a book should be in the collection or not. As I mentioned about works by minority authors, these works may not be primarily about advancing the welfare or status of minority groups, but still they can provide valuable insights. So although we have the prior guidelines to judge by, there is some leeway necessary to determine what titles can be added to the collection. And judging all these criteria, so I know that judging all these criteria can be intimidating, especially if you don't have a background knowledge about these topics, which we all have our blind spots. One benefit we have here at Georgia Southern is that before our books reach the shelves, we pass through several people who each have their own opportunity to look at the title and see if maybe this item should be added to our collection. And I believe that's been a really valuable part of our process here. Okay, next. All right, so here I've got two examples of books that are on our shelves here at Georgia Southern. So we have We Are Everywhere, Protest, Power, and Pride in the History of Queer Liberation by Matthew Reimer and Leighton Brown, and Clinical Trial Methodology by Ding-King Chen and Carl E. Peace. So if we were to assess these titles for their relevance to the collection, we would place We Are Everywhere in our diversity and inclusion collection, because it is a work which is about the history of the LGBT community, authored by two gay authors, which highlights the experience of identities within the community. Meanwhile, Clinical Trial Methodology would not be included in the Diverse Perspectives collection, despite some of the authors and editors belonging to minority groups. This is because the subject matter of this work is not primarily related to the ethos of the collection. Okay, and the next part of the process is subject headings. Subject headings are a vital tool in making sure a title is easily accessible in our collection. Because we primarily use copy cataloging here at Georgia Southern, subject headings are usually already assigned to a lot of the records we use. And this can actually be another useful tool in determining whether or not an item is relevant to our collection, because sometimes subject headings may be more direct and understandable than the summaries of some works. On occasion, however, we do need to create original records for new works that arrive here. When we do assign call numbers and subject headings, we do it based on the primary subject of the work. Unfortunately, not all topics have corresponding subject headings or call numbers in existing standards. This is actually a fair bit more frequent with minority topics, as standards like the Library of Congress classification or Library of Congress subject headings were created in a period of time when many minority communities were not allowed the same level of input into the cultural conversation that are now available to them. As such, many of these older, well-established controlled vocabularies are playing catch up to newer terminology at a fairly slow pace compared to how much the vocabulary is currently expanding. So in cases like these, where there aren't any good options, it may be worth looking into external vocabularies specifically designed around minority groups, if those exist. The example we listed here is Homosaurus, which is a controlled vocabulary dedicated to terms relevant to the LGBT community. And actually, in this presentation, we do have a link to Homosaurus. So when the presentation is made available later, if that interests you, you can check it out from here. And now I will be passing off back to Rebecca.
All right, thank you, Nathan. So as Nathan discussed how DEI materials are cataloged, the other areas of cataloging that play a part are where did the materials go in the library and how do we build these collections? So here at Georgia Southern, when it comes to where these items will go in our physical collection, we ask a few questions that are based on our departmental policies. Is the work primarily about DEI subject matter? And is there a diverse perspective? Based on the answers to these questions, the cataloger will determine if the book goes into our physical popular reading location, which is an area, physical location in our library that is specifically for popular topics of the day. And so if we determine that it needs to go into this location, then it will go there. And those materials are more easily browsed by our patrons. If it is not a hot topic or a popular reading type topic, they'll go to our general stacks location. Those are really the only things we use to determine where our DEI materials will go, because our library does not have a written collection policy. The librarians here spent time developing these collections, but we never actually wrote up a policy on development of the materials for these collections or a criteria for how to determine where the materials physically end up. So it's part of the art in the cataloging science. In addition to where materials go, we also have to look at how do we get these materials here to begin with. Again, there is no collection development policy for DEI materials. It's just kind of understood that when materials surrounding the subject matter are requested, then we will purchase them. We do this on a demand-driven acquisition policy basis, and any patron may request an unowned item to be purchased. And as long as a few qualifications are met according to the acquisitions librarian, then the material will be purchased. So some of those qualifications are buying materials that are currently needed, not possibly one day may be needed. If it's a fiscally responsible purchase, not some outrageous amount for one item, and if it supports student and faculty success. If those points are met, then we'll buy an item. Generally, we buy anything that's requested, but there are a few times where it's not feasible. The other area to consider is intentionality. The demand-driven process requires intentionality, but only in that we're buying what's requested. It is up to the requesters to be intentional about the subject matter being requested. And I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. If y'all can hear it, I never get calls. I apologize. So it's up to the requesters to be intentional about the subject matter being requested, which in turn means it's up to teaching faculty to require certain subject matter to be read. This can leave a lot up in the air as to growing a diverse subject matter collection. However, that is where the partnership with the ULDC becomes very beneficial. There are many titles in our DEI collections that were requested for purchase by Kay and other ULDC members, specifically for the purpose of collection development. So hopefully soon, our Library Collection Development Committee can sit down and create an official DEI policy for development of these materials. Until then, though, we will continue growing these collections as we have been. And now I'm going to pass it off to Payton.
When it comes to DEI cataloging, it's important to understand why it's necessary to create these easily accessible DEI collections. As the idea of diversity and inclusivity evolves with social movements, so does the demand for information surrounding those movements. The suffrage and civil rights movements saw an increase in public demand for books written by and about the experiences of Black and women authors. The subsequent LGBTQ+ liberation movement continues into modern day, and as such, there's a current demand for queer perspectives in literature. Making sure that books with diverse perspectives are easily accessible in the catalog allows for greater visibility of these DEI topics, and it ensures that anyone with an interest in inclusive literature can find it in one place. Of course, with these social movements being the driving force of this demand and interest, it can be subject of controversy. As many of you know, the most challenged books in modern libraries are those with LGBTQIA content, but this can't stop the mission of our libraries to serve all communities, and especially those that are marginalized. As we continue to move forward in a more inclusive world, it's even more important that we in the libraries build these collections that are proactive to the demand for inclusive resources rather than reactive. And with that in mind, I'll give it back to Rebecca for some final words and maybe some questions.
Why do we mute ourselves? We always forget to unmute ourselves. Okay, well, so that's essentially our diversity, equity, and inclusion collections, bibliographic collections, in a nutshell. So we thank you all very much for joining us today. We are happy to take any questions that you guys might have, or we would love to hear about your DEI collections if you have them, how you develop them. As I said, we don't have a collection development policy. So if you wanted to share any of your tips and tricks on growing your collections, that would be awesome. But if you think of anything after this presentation concludes, The contact information for the 4 of us is available here and will be sent out after GUGM is over, and we would be thrilled to hear from any of you. So thank you very much. And I just saw in the chat, Anne asked, do you have the link to the Homosaurus? Yes, we can absolutely throw that into the chat real quick. Oh, thank you, Payton. And it's a great, I've done a workshop, I think it was, with the Homosaurus people. And it's a fantastic vocabulary. It's clearly very diverse, but it's very thoughtful. The people who have built it and provide it, it's a very thoughtful organization and doing some great work. And as Nathan mentioned, it fills in the areas that Library of Congress misses. So I highly recommend using it if you can. Thank you, Anne. Any other questions or stories? Oh, okay. So Shelley has asked, how do you know how many books are in each collection? Is there something on the label or a sticker that tells DEI? Is there a note in the bib record? Since they're not all shelved together, I wonder how patrons find these. So that's great, multiple questions, Shelley. So for the first one, how do you know how many books are in each collection? So as Alma users, these are physical collections in Alma in the sense that our quality metadata manager can go in, and I don't know how, he's the wizard of our department, he knows how, and creates a collection. And so then when we are going through the cataloging process, we add these books to the collection that we determine they fit best into. So I can go in as the collection management librarian, I can go into Alma and click on a link that says manage the collections, and I can open it up and it shows me how many titles are in that collection because we have put it there when we go through the cataloging process and assign it a collection. How our patrons find this is when they're in Primo and doing a search, we have all of our filters on the sides that they can go through and narrow their search. So one of our filters are our collections, and we have more than these DEI collections. We have our special collections collection. We have new resources collection, available soon collection. So we have multiple collections and they're all listed. And so if somebody is specifically wanting a diverse perspectives item, they can click on that collection and it will list everything in there for them to view. And then I lost your question, Shelley. So yeah, and as far as the materials that are in our popular reading collection, that record will have 2 collections listed. It will have the DEI collection and it will have the popular reading collection. And that gives them the collections that this title is a part of. But then since the popular reading collection is also a physical collection and location, it will tell them that that's where it's located to go and find it. Does that make sense? Sure hope so. And Shelley, if that doesn't answer something, pop it into the chat and I'll get to it in just a second. Jackie has said, I came in late, so I may have missed this, but are you doing any title by title selecting or just collection purchases? If you do individual selecting, how do you go about finding these titles? I'll let Kay or Payton answer the title by title selecting, if they would be so inclined.
Sure. Yes, most of the times we as the involvement of the ULDC, it's in terms of doing title by title selecting, depending on the subject, the broad subject matter, and the attending authors or producers. Also, if the material requested, if it's not requested by myself or any member of the ULDC, if it is attached to a particular program within the university, then we literally meet with the professors or faculty members who would have made this request to see if this is the route they want to go. Usually it's that way. Otherwise, if myself or one of the members of the team see it fit, then of course we go that route. Otherwise, sometimes it just boils down to just a collection purpose because we feel that it should be integrated, it should belong to the collection itself. And it has more than just archival value.
I'll also say in terms of title by title selecting, we also do a demand-driven acquisition is our approach. So as we mentioned, anybody can request a title be selected. But we also have in the catalog on-demand options. So there is a record in the catalog. It says on demand when you're going through the search results list, but we don't physically own the book or the ebook. If a patron sees that title when they do a search and they click on it, and it can be very confusing for our patrons. It's something that we try to mitigate the confusion of by creating notes that we put into the record. But our patrons, if they see a title that's on demand, they can click on that, and there are links within the record that they can then click on and fill out a purchase request and ask us to buy the book or the ebook. And we generally have a pretty quick turnaround time, especially on the ebooks and getting those to the patrons. But again, it can be kind of confusing for them because they see it in the catalog, so they assume we own it and have it, and it's something that they can go and get in that moment. So it's a little hit or miss and a love-hate kind of relationship by the librarians too. So that's another way that we do title by title selecting.
Another really great resource for title by title selection for, say, if the ULDC comes across them and sent them along to cataloging, is the ALA's inclusive book lists. They do have a list of diverse perspectives kind of books and the most recent DEI-driven literature, and those are really good references to look for.
Those are really great questions. Thank you, everybody. Payton, did you see that question? There you go. She's just on it. Does anybody have any other questions? Thank you, Jack. Okay.
Rebecca, I've just added 2 sources to the chat because the other question, the other thing I don't think I answered was how do you go about finding these titles? And these 2 websites are very helpful. Diverse Book Finder as well as the other one.
Yeah, I mean, with DEI being the subject that it is these days, you could probably Google very easily and find all sorts of resources to find titles to build this collection. And that's probably what we need to do for that diverse leadership collection that we have. 8 titles is pretty sad. So we definitely need to try and build that. I thought it was more than that. So when I was creating this presentation, it was like, oh, that's a
Well,
little.
part of the reason for that is just when we created the collection, we didn't really have, because our collection is so large, we didn't have the opportunity to go back through our back catalog books we already had and add every single possible one to it. It's something that would be nice to be able to do if we had more manpower, of course. But
Yeah, nobody has lots of manpower these days, so it's interesting. Shelley just put in chat, I wonder if you considered calling this the EDI collections instead of DEI, as ALA goes by EDI, I believe. Oh, does it? I didn't know that. All right, something new. We can look into that. Thank you, Shelley. Anything else? Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I guess I'm going to pass it over to Sean or Joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
Okay.
y'all. And as usual, we'll have the recordings up ASAP. And yeah, thank you. And everybody enjoy your lunch. And we'll hopefully see you back at 1 o'clock for our next session. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.